He sold her for a contract, a signature, and a kiss goodbye. That was all it took to turn vows into currency. Lena had once believed love was sacred, that a man's eyes told the truth. But his were gold, and she was merely something to trade. When they dragged her into that cold, foreign night, she thought it was the end, her body bruised, her heart already dead. But death, it seems, was kinder than marriage, because she woke up not in the past, but in the chance to rewrite it. Now, the man who betrayed her doesn't know the woman he once sold is alive, richer than kings, and standing behind the empire he kneels before. And this time, she's the one making the deal. Before the fall, Lena Vale lived inside a dream made of silk and promises. Adrian, her husband, her savior, her world, had found her painting in a sunlit alley, her hands stained with color and hunger. He'd told her she was meant for more, and she'd believed him. In his arms, she found warmth. In his voice, safety. In his lies, forever. Their marriage was the fairy tale the media loved, the billionaire and his quiet artist. He brought her to glittering galas, kissed her before flashing cameras, called her his muse, and she painted his portrait 1,000 times, never noticing the cracks behind his smile. When the company began to crumble, Adrian changed. The tender man turned sharp, restless. He began whispering with Celia, Lena's best friend, her bridesmaid, the one who always lingered too close to him. Lena ignored the signs. Love makes you blind, but betrayal makes you wish you'd never seen. The night it happened was beautiful, a charity gala. Champagne, silk gowns, chandeliers like frozen stars. Adrian stood on stage, dazzling as ever. He thanked his wife for her inspiration, then introduced her to a man with oil on his hands and greed in his eyes. "Lena," he said, smiling too smoothly. "Meet Mr. Kazar. He's very interested in your talents." She didn't understand, not until later, not until the papers were signed in her name, false contracts, debts she never owed, her signature forged beneath his hand. By dawn, her accounts were empty, her passport gone, her freedom traded for a deal that saved his company. She screamed, begged, broke, but Adrian only looked tired. "You'll survive," he said coldly. "You always do." When they threw her into that truck, when the door slammed shut, she realized the truth. She hadn't married a man, she'd married her executioner, and as the sea swallowed her screams, something inside her whispered, "Remember this pain. One day, it will wear a crown." The sea did not keep her. It carried her broken, breathless, but alive to a foreign shore where no one knew her name. Fishermen found her tangled in nets, pale as foam. They thought she was dead until her fingers twitched, clutching the sand like a promise. When she woke in a stranger's hut, her first breath tasted of salt and fury. She remembered everything, the lies, the laughter, the man who sold her soul for money. Lena Vale was gone. Her body had lived, but her name had drowned. So she buried it, right there, beneath the waves that had spared her. And in its place, she became Ilara Quinn. Ilara spoke less, watched more. She took jobs no one wanted, serving tables, cleaning halls, anything to survive. At night, she studied numbers, markets, names. She devoured the language of power until it no longer frightened her. She learned that money was never evil, only the hands that held it. So she built her own. First, a small art studio, then a gallery, then a trading firm that bought broken companies and breathed life into them. Her face graced magazines, but her past remained a ghost, hidden behind soft smiles and sharp eyes. The world called her brilliant. She called herself reborn. Years later, she stood in her glass office overlooking the city skyline, a woman carved from her own ashes. The television played an interview. Adrian Vale, CEO of the once mighty Vale Industries, seeks investors after massive losses. Her breath stilled. There he was, older, desperate, haunted by his own greed. Ilara's lips curved, not in vengeance, but recognition. "The world is round," she whispered to the window, "and I'm finally standing higher." The girl he left to die had returned alive, unbroken, unstoppable. The city greeted her with the same skyline, sharp, glittering, merciless. Once, it had buried her. Now, it would bow. Lara Quinn stepped off the plane draped in quiet elegance, white silk, steady eyes. No trace of the girl named Lena. Her return was not announced, it was orchestrated. Within weeks, her company Quinn Global Holdings began talks to acquire struggling firms. At the top of that list, Vale Industries. Adrian Vale's empire was rotting from the inside. Scandals, debts, whispers of betrayal. He needed a savior, and she arrived like one. The board meeting was her stage. He entered, expecting another desperate investor. But when he saw her, he hesitated. Something about her eyes made his voice catch. Lara Quinn, he said, offering his hand. A pleasure. Her touch was cool, controlled. The pleasure, she replied, is business. From that moment, the game began. She studied him the way surgeons study illness, without emotion, only precision. She attended dinners with him and Celia, smiling politely as if she didn't know their sins. She let them underestimate her. She let them think she cared. Behind closed doors, she examined every flaw in his empire, every secret, every debt, every lie. Her hands rebuilt what his greed had broken, all while preparing to take it away. Sometimes, late at night, she would catch her reflection and see the ghost of Lena Vale staring back. A flicker of pain, a whisper of grief, but then she'd remember the salt, the darkness, the taste of betrayal, and the ghost would fade. At the next gala, the same golden ballroom where her world once shattered, she stood radiant beneath the chandeliers. He didn't recognize her past. He only saw his future. And that was her first victory. Not revenge. Control. She was no longer the woman he sold. She was the woman he would beg to buy. The night of reckoning was dressed in silver and applause. The world believed it was a merger, the rebirth of Vale Industries. In truth, it was the end of Adrian Vale. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and ambition. Reporters lined the walls, cameras humming, waiting to capture redemption. Adrian stood beside Lara, smiling the way he used to, charming, practiced, hollow. He thought he'd won. He thought she was his salvation. Lara's pen poised above the contract. So did his. 2 signatures, and his empire would breathe again. She signed first, her eyes steady. Then she slid the folder across the table. He grinned, signing without reading the final clause. He never noticed the company seal embossed with Quinn Global Acquisitions. When the flashbulbs exploded, she rose. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said softly into the microphone, "thank you for witnessing history, the official acquisition of Vale Industries." Adrian's head snapped toward her. "Acquisition," he repeated, his voice cracking. A ripple of confusion spread across the crowd. Lara met his gaze, calm, mercilessly gentle. "Yes," she said. "You didn't merge with me, Adrian. You sold everything." Again, the room froze. Whispers surged like wind through glass. She turned to the reporters. "I am Lara Quinn," she continued. "But once, I was Lena Vale, the woman this man sold to save his fortune." The cameras caught his face, pale, trembling, hollow. He reached for her, stammering, "Lena, I didn't mean," but she stepped back. "You meant every word. And now, so do I." Security escorted him out as reporters shouted questions. She didn't follow. She didn't gloat. She didn't look back. Because revenge wasn't the fire that burned him, it was the silence that followed. As she stood beneath the flashing lights, her hands didn't shake. Justice wasn't loud. It was finished. In the weeks that followed, the world devoured the scandal. Headlines screamed his downfall, but Lara remained silent. No interviews. No victory speeches. She had already won quietly, completely. Vale Industries became the Quinn Foundation. Its profits were redirected to shelters, art programs, and women rebuilding their lives from ashes. Every brick he once owned now held her promise. No one else will be sold to survive. Celia fled the country, her fame dissolving into rumor. Adrian disappeared, a shadow wandering foreign cities, haunted by the empire he lost. Lara never searched for him. Some ghosts didn't deserve graves. Her days grew softer. Mornings began with brushstrokes and light instead of boardrooms and vengeance. She painted the sea, the one that had nearly taken her, and titled it Rebirth. It sold for millions. She donated every cent. Sometimes she'd walk along the harbor where her story had once ended. The wind tasted the same salt, memory, freedom. One afternoon, she met a man there. A writer, kind eyes, quiet voice. He didn't ask about her past. He only asked what she loved most about starting over. She smiled. That I don't need to be loved to be whole. Still, he stayed patient, steady, never demanding more than she could give. And in his silence, she found something gentler than revenge peace. A Lara Quinn no longer lived to prove anything. She lived to feel again, to build, to breathe, to forgive not him, but herself. The night she finally burned her last painting of Adrian, she watched the embers rise like stars. It didn't hurt. It didn't heal. It simply ended. And that was enough, because survival wasn't the opposite of destruction, it was the art of turning it into beauty. They buried her in betrayal, but she rose in brilliance. He sold her name, but she made it eternal. He traded her heart for profit, but she built an empire with its ashes. In the end, she didn't need revenge, only remembrance, because every empire built from pain carries a whisper of the woman who refused to stay broken. And sometimes the most exquisite vengeance is simply surviving beautifully. He sold her once, but the world would remember her as the woman no one could ever own.